Please.
At age 29, Jeffrey met David Thomas, his 9th victim. He reported that he met him on his way to a bar. He propositioned him and then brought him back to his apartment. They watched a video. He gave him a drink, strangled him, and then posed him. He kept the body for 1 to 2 days, and he laid the body on the edge of his tub and, quote, slit open his belly, end quote. He took pictures of him. He defleshed him, acidified the flesh and skull, and kept the skull. He wanted to dry the skull out quicker and consequently took the victim, Edward's skull and David Thomas's skull, and put them in the oven. And Jeffrey told me 75% of his attraction was to men when they were not conscious. 25% were when they were dead. That's what he said. Let's look, however, at what he did. What he did was he had sex with them once they were dead.
Okay. Now, in that regard, and as tough a question as this to ask you, and as tough as the answer is going to be, did you go into any detail with Jeffrey Dahmer as to whether or not he did or did not have sex with every one of his victims, how often he had sex, and the type of sex that he had?
I did.
And what did you find?
Well, I think as I mentioned previously, Mr. Boyle, I found in interviewing Jeffrey that in some sense it was not difficult for him to describe what he did with the bodies in terms of getting to the skeleton part. What I felt was difficult was for him to be very graphic in the description of the sexual activity he engaged in with the people after they were dead. So, and knowing that people have difficulty with this, I asked him more detailed questions upon my return here. And it was as I had suspected, in that he did have sex with, and I apologize again for the graphic nature of this, he did have sex with every one of the 17 victims.
Doctor, I'm going to show you the exhibit that is now called Defendant's Exhibit 27. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. I'm going to ask you to look at the subcommittees under sexual disorders on paraphilias, and I'm going to ask you to tell us whether or not the name of Judith Becker, PhD, appears there.
Yes, it does.
You were one of how many people on that committee?
9.
What was Mr. Dahmer's paraphilia?
Well, I gave him the diagnosis of necrophilia.
Now, Doctor, I don't want to be repetitious, and I think I'm about finished with my examination. You have testified, I believe, that to the legal standard, but once again, your findings that you have made earlier as to Jeffrey Dahmer's mental disease at the time of the commission of the offense was that he was suffering from mental disease.
That's correct.
And it is, as you have told us, necrophilia.
That's correct.
Which is part of the paraphilia family.
That's correct.
Are all necrophiliacs mentally ill or diseased? I'm sorry. Do all people have necrophilia and mental suffering from a mental disease?
No.
As Mr. Dahmer was going along these killing sprees, what was happening to his concept of capacity to conform and the lack thereof?
It was eroding. As a matter of fact, and again, This was not in my notes. Jeffrey said to me after he lost his job, he said it was like all of the dominoes fell down.
And what is the opinion that you came to relative to that question?
That he is suffering from a mental disease.
And what is the name of that mental disease?
The name of the mental disease is necrophilia.
As a result, and was that mental disease present on each and every one of the 15 occasions where he committed the homicides?
In my opinion, it was.
As a result of that mental disease, and on each and every one of those 15 instances, were you able to arrive, in an opinion, to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty as to whether or not Mr. Dahmer lacked substantial capacity to conform his conduct to the requirements of law?
Yes, I'm of the opinion that in relation to those 15 homicides that he lacked substantial capacity to conform his behavior.
And was the lack of his capacity to conform his behavior because of his mental disease?
That's my opinion.
And that's to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty?
Yes, it is.